Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Do you suffer from wanderlust? Do you think about all the places you'd like to get away to, convene with nature, get a little bit off the grid, and just feel like you're kind of off on your own little vacation in your own space? Well, I have the guest for you this week. My guest is Zoey Berghoff. She chases her own wanderlust for her and her family by creating unique short-term rental stays all over. You're going to love this show, and we've been on a run of short-term rentals, but they're all different. You can really upgrade your short-term rental game if you listen to these string of episodes. This one is no different. You're going to get a lot out of it. My only ask of you is, if you're consistently listening to the podcast or here and there, and you want to listen more, make sure that you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. That way you'll get it in your inbox Monday and Thursday mornings. Let's go. This is episode 128 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Zoey Berghoff. Zoey is a visionary in the world of short-term rentals, renowned for her unique approach to Airbnb and unique stays that offer unforgettable experience to her guests, development, glamping, and land hacking, all of these things. I'm excited to talk to you. Zoey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, no, you really have taken a unique slant since you started. Do you remember back when the first time you were interested in real estate, maybe not even knowing that it was going to become something that you ended up doing full time?
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. I was like 10 years old. We had cabins in northern Michigan, and my mom put them. She was on Vrbo and Airbnb before the platforms even existed. So checks used to get mailed in, and she had calendars printed out of the dates that were booked and whatnot. And I remember at 10 years old being like, guests are coming in. We got to switch cabins today. And it's so funny to see, 20 years later, that's exactly what I'm doing with my husband and my baby.
Yeah.
And here we are. It's kind of come full circle to be doing real estate in the same way she was.
Yeah, if you look back at how it was being done now to then, obviously technology has changed a lot of things, but did the hospitality, and because I was involved in it back then as well, the hospitality part has stayed pretty much the same, just maybe upgraded, right?
Yes. Yeah. The tech stack has improved for sure. It was funny when she was doing it, it was 7-day rental. So she knew every Sunday was a big clean day. Right. She would drive up and do the clean, and everything had to get out of the house. But honestly, it's been the true hospitality way, has been the same for years and years to come. So anyone trying to get into it, it's not as complicated as it sounds. It's very simple when you look at what it is.
Yeah, but I think to do it simply, you have to actually care about the product, right? I mean, that's part of what you have already, been building. It's a unique aspect, which is the thing that has carried you and many others through what was alleged as doom and gloom for short-term rentals for 2 years, right?
Yeah, you do have to think about the consumer and the guest that's going to be in the property and cultivate every single aspect, especially, when we're doing these builds and renovations. Every single thing we're working on, we're thinking about like, this guest is coming here to do X, Y, Z, and they are going to want to have, this amenity or the kitchen laid out like this. So you definitely want to think about that overall experience that you're offering to get those 5-star reviews.
Do you use what you learned though in your childhood now as like things you remember from as a kid, thinking your mom was saying, oh, well, we need more of this? Because a lot of it's still applicable, just again, with less technology.
Yeah, it is. I remember, when she would have a cleaner not able to clean, and it would be a 4-hour drive up, and she would start at like 5 a.m. to be the one doing it. So lesson learned there, always have your cleaners and backup cleaners in case something happens. But she's actually been able to provide a lot of insight just from, she's had guest experiences and things that have happened that she's had to handle. So she's brought that towards our business.
Yeah, and that part's changed a little because technologically it's a little bit easier to contact them. Where before it was like they're probably
Yeah.
just calling your mom on a landline or
Yes.
something and complaining, and there were no reviews, so it was like a little
Yep.
bit easier to make a mistake. Do you feel that there's more pressure now than there was then, or is it just a different kind?
Definitely, I would say it's definitely different than it was. We're not mailing checks. The platforms now exist. So it's completely different in terms of a host perspective. But honestly, it's not that crazy different when you think about that end user experience. But I definitely think the platforms have held hosts to a higher expectation. And honestly, that's any industry as it becomes around longer and, it's just rolling out more saturation, if people would like to say that, that's where it's going to hold people to higher expectations.
Yeah, I'll definitely get back to your journey, but I wanted to get your take on this. A lot of people look at Airbnb since it's the biggest conglomerate of the sites and they think negatively of it, but it's really a marketing tool, right? How have you looked at it as part of your journey as somebody who's hosting and building things specifically to market them through there? How do you look at them as a conduit for your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny because everyone's like, oh, you do Airbnbs. And it's like, we actually do short-term rentals and they just are listed on Airbnb.
Yeah.
But I totally understand, Airbnb has done a great branding that's when you think of vacation rentals, that's what you're thinking of. Whether it's going to be Airbnb for the next 5 years or it's a different channel in 10 years, hospitality and vacation rentals have been around for generations and centuries. So that's not going anywhere. And that's where, you just want to make sure you're taking advantage of all the channels out there, using a PMS to run your business so you can host a different guest. Right. And also think of that direct booking aspect and, capturing those guests that you are getting on Airbnb. I don't know if Airbnb will be the forever channel for 10 to 15 years to come, but the idea of travel is not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, surely if it's not, it will because something else came up that just did a little bit better because these things aren't going away. Why do you think the consumer is so much, I guess, seemingly more interested in short-term rentals? I know why I am, but I want to get your take on, especially with what the type of unique stays that you're providing. What's really the lure of that against people who used to just stay in hotels, maybe?
Great question. Right up my alley.
Yeah.
We definitely try to cultivate unique stays. And I think the definition of unique in short-term rentals can be so widely accepted. It doesn't have to be a tiny home or a yurt. It can also be, the house is on top of a mountain and not a lot of people get to live like that. So I personally believe the short-term rental industry is just going to continue to grow because people want to escape what their everyday life is. And for that week-long stay or 48 hours, experience almost a different way of life. And not to say someone that's going to want to live in a yurt for 365 days, but for a 4-day getaway, they get to almost live a completely different life than what they have at home. And that's why I personally believe unique stays are what's growing, because you can get a traditional neighborhood home because a lot of people live in homes like that already.
Yeah.
But we try to really think of, okay, how can we make this property completely different than what people get out of their normal life, and why would they pay for it as well?
Yeah. And you've really capitalized on glamping, which to me, I didn't understand it at first. And then I was like, wait, I never want to go camping. Like that's not for me. Glamping, I'm like, well, it seems like I'm going camping, but I can get this sweet yurt with all the amenities in it. Is that really the lure? People kind of feel like, hey, I'm kind of going off the grid, but I'm still going to have Netflix and it's going to be really cool inside.
Yes. Yeah. I think, our ideal guest for the year is not everyone. So that was something I had to learn early on. Was I kind of thought in the beginning, you don't want to maybe disclose like, oh, the Wi-Fi could get spotty or it's a dirt road to the property. And we were getting people that weren't an ideal fit. Yeah. Like they were leaving reviews where it was like, just so you know, there's no air conditioning. And I was like, obviously there's no air conditioning.
Right.
But to me, that was obvious. And to a user, it's not always obvious. So as a host, I've actually learned to almost take a step back and put all those disclosures up front. on the platform so that they completely see what the experience is going to entail, good and, not so good sometimes.
Yeah.
And that really helped improve our reviews and overall stay for our guests. But, some of our guests will message me like, I slept outside in the hammock last night. And I'm like, you did? There's a lot of animals around. Do you know that? But, that's the ideal person, is they really just want to get away. We've even hosted someone who was a tech guy out of San Francisco. He drove his Tesla up like the dirt mountain road. And he was like, I just want to have like a getaway for 7 days. But there is that Wi-Fi and that creature comfort and, the bathroom and all of that.
Yeah.
So that does factor into our price point as well with those creature comforts.
Yeah, but I think that goes to expectations. I was doing short-term like 20, 25 years ago when it was just like HomeAway just started. And we realized, like, when somebody started to make a complaint, the first thing we did is, well, is this something that's in our description? And so in the beginning, a lot of it's your fault. Like you say, we didn't think we needed to tell you that this is how the bathroom worked, but we do. And then as you start to incorporate that, like you said, you're level setting the consumer. And so a lot of it, I think the Airbnb hosts or short-term rental hosts who don't succeed aren't taking the feedback, and they're not incorporating it to say more. So like you said, you've already level set them. They already know what to expect so that you're already closer to that 5-star review before they even get there, because nothing's going to be a surprise. But yeah, I think if you went and you didn't know that like there was an outhouse, you would probably write a review saying, P.S., the bathroom's outside. Has that been something that has helped you moving forward when you're getting new ones now? You've kind of learned the lessons. So you're more is smarter now in terms of information.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Actually, in one of our listings, like we live on, it's 8,500 feet in elevation. So it's literally on a mountain. And, the first winter was a great learning lesson for us as hosts and guests.
Yeah.
And not to say that, nothing went like astray, but it was now in our listing, I literally say like, you have to have 4x4 for November to May. And that's literally for the guests to understand that. That's for us to set that expectation. I say that like 4 times before they even arrive, because I have had the guests that show up and say like, my Tesla will get there. And I'm like, it won't get there actually, not at all. So yes, I definitely like to not over-inform. You want to keep in mind, like if your hot tub company comes on a Monday, not every potential guest needs to know that. But once they've booked, it's good to let them know.
Yeah.
But you definitely want to let potential guests, like maybe they're not comfortable driving to the mountains, then tell them stay in town. And you need to make that clear on your listing. So we keep those things in mind on our listings. And when we're creating stays, even this most recent property where the hot tub went, the placement was thought of based on the guest experience and, what would be the most enjoyable.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things you've said so far is that these, especially the more unique stay you get, you have to be clear that it's not for everyone. You'll lose clients by trying to market to everyone, trying to convince someone who doesn't really want that getaway that they might like it, and then you're risking a bad review. Has that really helped you as well? Because then you really go all in on the location and you deflect the people. You don't want the so-so people, because they're likely to write a bad review because their expectations are off.
Exactly. Yeah, it has actually helped us a lot. Like I said, the first summer, I was like, everyone wants to stay in a year. And then I was like, actually, people were leaving reviews like, oh, like the TV could get spotty or something. And I'm like, if you're coming to a year to watch TV, you're just probably not supposed to stay in a year. So I've had people message me saying like, we have our 2 kids, one's crawling, our 2 pets, us. And I'm just like, I just don't think you're really going to have the best time. Like, it can get warm in there. It's really designed for someone to have a spot to come and sleep, make breakfast, and then you go outside all day, because in July, it can get warm in here naturally. So we definitely will completely tell a guest, like, you're welcome to stay, but I personally, if I were you, you may be better fit in town or, in a normal house. And we've had people who say like, no, we really want to be there. And I totally get it. And then it's, you set that expectation from the beginning.
Yeah. And then they can also plan backwards against what they were expecting first to know like, okay, it's a little bit more roughing it than we thought. But you're not going to end up with a bad review on that. Hopefully the regular person's going to say, no, I mean, Zoey told us that we went for it. It was a little bit much, and then maybe they just choose not to do it next time.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely every guest, has a different experience. But what we really try to do when we create these unique stays is we love them equally as much. So we're hoping to host a guest that equally love them. And when you put so much work into these stays and someone doesn't see what's so special about them, whether it's like the view or the type of stay or the historic you're bringing into life, you're not for everyone. And you don't want to be for everyone. Like, you don't want to be the house that every single person is trying to stay at.
Yeah, for sure. So do you not use Instabook? Because I feel like that might help. That could be a
Yes.
real problem.
That's a good question. So I actually, on the yurt, I sometimes go back and forth depending on the booking lead time we're getting and kind of like the guests coming in. But I actually, last summer, I turned off Instant Book on the yurt because we were just getting people who were like trying to come with, 2 dogs, and the yurt is elevated on a deck. So it's like you have to go down to, it's just, we weren't getting the person who's going to have the best time. So it's actually kind of against the algorithm for me to have Instant Book off.
I know.
I found an increase in reviews, guest enjoyment, hosting enjoyment as well into who we were hosting. So some unique stays, it could be a better fit. If you do have Instant Book off, your response time needs to be like A1 for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's important. I mean, that's part of the whole thing, is how the algorithm works. As much as we all despise every algorithm that's ruining our lives, you have to play the algorithm to be successful as a short-term rental host, right?
Yep, exactly. And I personally, if you have Instant Book off because it doesn't make sense for you and you find yourself canceling people, you're going to hurt yourself in the superhost status route. So if you are going to have Instant Book off, you want to have everything else. Really, professional photos, that listing description, amenities, everything. But I've told people, like, if Instant Book is what's causing the guests that aren't wanting to stay with you at the end of the day, don't feel like you have to have it on because Airbnb says you do.
Yeah. Yeah, right. All right. Well, let's go back a little. What was the first property you bought with the intent to turn it into a short-term rental?
That's a good question. So we kind of got into short-term rentals accidentally. I wouldn't say our first few properties.
Well, most people say they became an accidental landlord. You're like accidental short-term host. So I can't wait to hear the story. Yeah.
Yeah. We had my husband found land that he was just in love with, and his only ability to get the land was to build on it. So the first thing that went on it was a yurt and then a single family home. So that's where the idea of land tacking comes in. So it had 2 structures permitted for the property, and we were traveling a ton. We had a rooftop tent, and I was just like, we were kind of home basing at the yurt per se in the summer. And I was like, I feel like we should rent this. And this was like pandemic 2020, everything went crazy in terms of travel and who's traveling and who isn't. And we just had the idea to rent it. And the first month it made $3,000, and a yurt does not have a lot of expenses because of the type of stay it is. So I was just like, I mean, you guys, I was doing everything I now tell people not to do, like the iPhone photos. I didn't know anyone who was hosting. I didn't know an Airbnb host. I did not know anything that people now know and who are listening to this. And I just was like, I think this is like something worth going into. And the other property on this land had a long-term renter in it. And then once they gave us a 30-day notice to move out, we had this property. We were living in a different state. We didn't want to sell it per se, but we did put it for sale at the time, which is funny to now look back at. And we were like, we don't want to pay the mortgage out of our paycheck at the time. So we flew back into the state and had a week window to furnish that long-term rental that was completely vacant.
Yeah.
And we put it on Airbnb. And in the first month, it covered the mortgage, and it's covered it ever since, 4 or 5 years from now. And that was like, we kind of just fell into it in a way, but that completely changed everything for us. When we saw that first property make over 6 figures the first year, and we didn't really know what we were doing, we were like, this is something. So now we actively are doing that on purpose.
Right. But when you made the decision to put it on short-term rental, the yurt first, did you think back that that's what your mom did, or did it not even connect yet? Because sometimes it's hard to connect the dots till you're a little bit further along.
Yeah, it didn't really connect at the time. Like, there was no intent where I was like, I saw my mom do this when I was younger, and I'm going to do this. There was no connection. I had no thought growing up that I was going to do this. But then looking back at the time, my husband was like, you're crazy. No one's going to want to rent a yurt. And I was like, maybe we are crazy, but let's try it because we're not here anyways. And I remember talking to her, and she was like the only one that could provide intel, like, make sure you have a second set of sheets and maybe have a storage of extra towels and stuff. And now fast forward to here, she was probably like, one of the only people I ever knew who managed vacation rental personally. Now, there's so many resources out there, like a podcast like this. So it's a different game.
Yeah, but it's still like the people who started doing it back then were always focused on the guests because there was no internet to please, there were no photos to upload. It was really like you look through a book. They were kind of a lot of more timeshare type situations at the time. Yeah, because I just remember I was thinking when I asked you that question, like I remember when I flipped my first house and my dad was a flipper and I did it and I wasn't thinking like, hey, I'm doing what my dad's doing. And then I finished and I was like, wait, this is what he was talking about. I barely did anything and I just made a bunch of money. Oh, he was smart. He was ahead of his time. So you must have had these things come up where you're like, that must have been really interesting back then before you had to do all of the technology to keep up.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom now says, she's like, little did I know what I was into, 25 years ago. She's like, I should have probably kept with it because those properties are now sold. But, she was like, I paid your college tuition with the rental income that those made for those 6 months while they were live. So it's cool to see what she had done is probably what we will also do for our daughter. But yeah, she's like, now knowing how much momentum's in this industry, I probably should have kept going.
Yeah, she did well though, either way. And now, but you passed the knowledge on to you and now you're taking the torch and going forward with it. So after you did that one, that was the accidental short term. Which was the first one that you went to after that where you said, okay, let's buy one with the specific intent. We're going to do this as a short-term rental because it's different planning. I think investors are out there not sure what they want to do for their first investment, but it's not like, yes, you can do short-term in a lot of places, but you're talking destination stays. So you can't really, you're not thinking, hey, let me get this up on top of these rocks on a hill and we'll just make a long-term renter out of that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. We had a coincidental market that my husband bought land in, and also it's in Colorado, near Skier. Like it was just a lucky market that people also live in long term, and it's a huge tourism market. We actually, we do all of our properties. We haven't done anything turnkey at the moment, so we do glamping, builds, and renovations. We actually, which this is where I kind of preach, like you can have lifestyle and profit and cash flow. You don't have to just chase the cash flow and never go to the property unless that's what you want for yourself. We are big on, we're creating stays that we love so we can also enjoy them, but they work as a short-term rental and they will make that profitability. Not a lot of investors are going that route. You have a fair split, but I personally think like you can have both. You don't have to invest in Gatlinburg and you don't personally enjoy Gatlinburg. That was me. I was like, I actually never want to go back there.
Right. I think that people confuse running it like a business, meaning you don't stay there. But when I was doing it, we only bought them where we wanted to stay. Like we were buying them in places where we wanted to stay so that my sister's friends would be there and they could manage them. Like that's the whole point. And then we would use them with their family and it would pay itself off. And it seems like a no-brainer, but you are running it like a business, but also getting the enjoyment out of it, which is the ideal kind of dual use.
Exactly. Yeah. So we were actually pretty logistical in terms of our next investment, that we did the same market that we already had fallen into because it was working. I knew the numbers. It's very, I could run the numbers. I knew our competitors. I made sure that property in that market would not be a competition directly to what we already had. So it's a completely different stay, different audience, different guest. It's not going for the same person. And there's a huge part when you're someone who's renovating or building, people don't realize like you need electricians and you need plumbers and you need, inspections, and having those resources is huge. We actually look back because the renovation we just worked on for the last 12 months, I was pregnant for, and we had our daughter. Yeah. And now looking back, I'm like, could you imagine if we had picked a market like 3 states over, we didn't know anyone, we didn't have, there is just something to be said for building those connections, especially where we choose to invest. It's near ski resorts where there's people that you can say a number and someone will pay you double for it. Right. And obviously we're not that person. So it does have some resources, and there was some reasoning as to why we chose that market again.
Yeah, and even on the cleaners, you're just making it easier for them instead of finding a whole. Cleaners are like the secret to the game that people don't think are a big deal. It's like, well, just have a couple bad cleaners and you'll find out when you get the 1-star review because the pillows weren't, even no pillowcases on them. Oh, we forgot, and they're still in the dryer. You know, I don't, it's happened to me. Like I'll stay because I've always stay at short-term rentals and I stay and you like, there's still laundry in there. And they're like,
Yeah.
should I tell the host? I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Like everything else looks good, but you're really balancing that. Hey, it's Jonathan. On this brief interlude, I wanted to let you know that my team is expanding. So Streamline Properties has now expanded from New Jersey, New York, and Nevada to the state of Florida. And because of that, our Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing meetups are also expanding. So right now we do real estate investor meetups in the state of New Jersey once a month on the first Wednesday of every month. You can find more info about those on our website at streamlinedwithad.properties, but those meetups are now opening in the Lakeland area of Florida starting in May 2024. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to be doing once a month meetups in the state of Florida, and we're not done, as we expect to be opening in California and Utah very, very shortly. Let's get back to the show. What were some of the pitfalls that you found as you got started of things that you should have known but didn't know and caused either bad reviews or just a pain?
Yes. Yeah, good question. I always like to say, as host, whatever seems obvious to you about your property per se, I can 100% guarantee is probably not obvious to someone else.
Yeah.
And, I don't know what that is about the guests or the IQ we're hosting. It is just something else. So it is super important as a host to make sure you're doing over communication in the property. It may seem obvious if your grill is by the house that you want them to move it away from the house if being in use. But if you don't say that, that's not obvious to someone. And now you're causing a possible house fire.
Right.
So there are things that I like to make it super easy for the guests to see those maybe house rules or just best use practices, whether it's a digital guidebook or you have it in the house as well. And that's something also to be said is like, know your guest, because some people maybe in a city, metro, super tech savvy, QR codes everywhere.
Right.
We do not have a QR code audience.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I don't like QR codes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm getting older, but like, I really I don't want to do that. I'd rather have the paper now. So and I would stay at like a unique stay. So I think it can be both. That's a good point.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we had a QR code option. We also had the printout of the same information. We send it in a link in their messaging. Some people really like to prepare for their travels and they print everything out and they have their boarding passes printed out. So, it's good to know who your guest is. And I know who our general age demographic is, what they're likely coming for. And that's also another thing is if you are someone who's celebrating with a glamping stay, we have tons of anniversaries and engagements and proposals. We've hosted like little weddings at the property and stuff. So if that is who your guest is going to be, maybe you start thinking of how your cleaners and you could, make those little moments special. Like you said, the cleaners are like the secret weapon in your business.
It's funny though, because that was literally the first thing you said in the beginning was about the cleaners with your mom. And it's like, well, other people outside, all these REITs and stuff trying to buy short-term rentals, they're not thinking like, I really need a good local cleaner, but that will kill your business right away because there's nothing worse than showing up and it's unkempt. I mean, it's like, that's a disaster. And it's happened a few times where I've shown up and the property was obviously like a bait and switch on the photos, which is crazy, but it does happen. Have you, and even with the photos, what's your view on the photos? Are you more like experiential with the photos, like, or just making sure you're documenting everything so they know, even some of the more odd stuff, like the elevation, like you said, it's really important to not just say it, but to show it. Because you have maybe one part of two partners is the reader and they read the stuff. And then another is like, oh, wait, that actually is higher than I thought.
Yes. Yeah. So if you have peak seasons in two different seasons, like summer and winter, I really encourage you guys to have professional photos for both because that's, we have February and July. Those are our two biggest months. They're completely opposite appearances of the property and experiences in total. So we have professional photos of both. And that's something you guys can ask your photographer. Ours works a deal. She'll charge us $700 for the first round and she'll come back for $300 to do the other photos. And I try to keep in mind I would rather capture the property entirely in summer and then get those like winter accent photos where it shows, the snow and the hot tub and everything.
Yeah.
So, you might not have to pay full price for both rounds. And we definitely include some of the experiential photos where it shows like, we actually have had tons of guests that are professional photos themselves, photographers and drones.
Yeah.
So I use their photos sometimes if they let me and just show like the Milky Way because, photographers aren't capturing at night. So.
Yeah. That's a really good point though. I mean, I think there's so many like, not just influencers, but just people who are really good on Instagram and photographers who come to stay there, especially the more unique they get. And they can turn into an evangelist for the property too, just by staying there. So that goes to you setting them up well, even more, because you don't know when someone with 200,000 followers shows up and then puts out a post about it and like, like now we're booked for a year. Has that happened? Because your stays are so unique. I can see people going out to try to go just for the purpose of going to, to see this particular property.
Yeah, so we have definitely had some people that seek us out for sure. I will say, the power of social media is absolutely incredible, but it's also to do social media right for a short-term rental is also very impressive and difficult to do. I have hundreds of thousands of followers and I only have had a few people really inquire and actually come to the property. It's just like the odds and probability and the amount. It's just large. But we have had people who, they're drone photographers. We get a lot of drone photographers, and which it makes sense. Like I asked my husband that, I was like, why do you think we attract drone photographers? He's like, we've got views. And I was like, that's all they want. Like that's what they need. But they'll send me their photos. And if I get their permission, they let me use it on their listing and give them credit for it. We had a guest once who kept asking me, we had like a motion light and he was like, is there any way you can turn it off? And I was like, it's a motion light. Like if you don't move, it won't go off.
Yeah.
And he just kept asking and asking. And he finally was like, I'll just put a towel over it. And I was so confused why he was so worried about it. And then the next morning he sent me photos of the Milky Way. And I was like, oh, he didn't want any of the light pollution. And he was like, I booked this because of how far I was from town, that there would be no lights. So people definitely do their due diligence of, where they want to stay in the location and whatnot.
Yeah, but that's also like, that's an appreciated feedback. Of course, it would be better if he just told you straight out, this is why, because then you're like, okay, maybe we do need to put that on a switch. You balance safety versus maybe some people are out here for the darkness. I really think that there's always the type of guest who's just annoying feedback, but those I feel like you try to weed out. My sister and I used to have a thing where if they asked any question before they book, we would just deny it. Because like it's it's going to be a problem. And then first we would evaluate, like I said before, oh wait, we didn't have that in the description. That's our fault. And then they would be fine. But if everything's in there and they're saying like, do you have 3 play packs for a kid? And you're like, I mean, we're already on a bad start here. Have you found that you've had to deny bookings? Well, you said before, just like logistically, that's probably not going to work for you. And I would think that the person booking that really appreciates that. Maybe they never end up staying because your stays are too unique for them, but at least it helps them not go on a different vacation that suits them better.
Yeah, in the first year of hosting, you're like, I will take anyone and everyone and I'll put up with everything. And then this is kind of something I preach on my channels is like, you have to have boundaries as a host. And for me, that was hard. Like I was like, the yes guest or host that was like, yeah, whatever you need, we can do this. Do you need someone to come? Like, and then my husband was like, Zoe, we are like not able to do all this. We need to like, they're just being ridiculous sometimes. So having those boundaries and also deciding what those are for you, that comes with time of just being like pushed a little bit too far. Or, if they're like, oh, well, I'll get a rental car, but it's not 4-wheel, it's just like, I even actually tell people, like, if you don't have 4x, don't even try to get to the house. Call me and we'll find a solution and I will just refund you, because if you get stuck, we have just way bigger problems than a payout that I'm supposed to be receiving.
Yeah.
So that's something also to know. But I've had people who, they were like, oh, we want to ship our furs to your property for our stay. And I was just like, our property doesn't even have a mailbox. Like, we don't even get mail. I was like, I was like,
Amazon doesn't even know where we are. So I don't think they're going to make it. Yeah. Yeah.
I almost I think scared them into canceling because they had direct instantly booked. And I was like, the questions they were asking, I just was like, we're supposed to have a huge snowstorm. Like, if you don't have ABC, you might not even leave the house. Like, I was just like, and it was all true, but I probably was like being a little dramatic. Yeah. And he's like, I think we're just going to cancel. It's fine. I'm like, okay, perfect. So.
Yeah. Well, so tell everybody how you got from getting into this as a short-term host to now helping other people do it, and coaching and
Hmm.
just what you're doing, because I really think it's something that people can learn and then do really well in. And the people that
Hmm.
we see, I'm sure you as well, see failing in short-term rental, just they don't have enough vision to do it the right way now. And you just can't
Hmm.
be medium, right? Like
Yeah,
it's just
you
not going
can't.
to work.
No. Yeah, I always say 2024 is like the year where less is more. And I'm more impressed by, if you have the 5 doors that are making the same amount as someone with 25 doors, like you're doing it right because you
So
can
much
build a 9 to 5.
smarter.
Yeah, it's so much
Yeah.
better. Like
Yeah.
you don't want to build another 9 to 5 for yourself. And you can do that before you even realize you've done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And something that we do because we do glamping and builds and renovations, and we don't really go, you can't find too many turnkey unique properties. You kind of have to bring them to life. If you can, you're going to probably have to do something to make it unique. And there's a lot you learn along the way in terms of bringing a property, like building a structure. It's not as easy as just plopping something on a piece of land. So as my husband and I had gone through that years and years, we were just, we know the questions to ask for. Do you need a septic engineer? Do you need this inspected? Do you have to have this looked at? Can you even have a tiny home? What is your ADU permitting? There's so many questions that if you don't know what questions to ask, it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I just kept seeing that theme time and time again. And as the unique industry and category kept growing, that's where people should be putting their time and attention. And that's where a lot of people have fun with it. Like my husband is the complete visionary of the two of us. I more so tell him, how much we can spend and what the budget is. I'm like the not fun person.
Yeah.
And he's like, we're buying an airplane and doing this and we're going to make it like this. And I'm just like, as long as it's in the budget, that's good for me. But I just had so many people coming to me, and there was just simple questions that they could have asked that could have kept them from that issue that was 10 months long now dealing with the county. So that's when I really stepped into, I think him and I could bring a lot of value to people's experiences and doing this the right way, because you cannot have to a short-term rental and succeed nowadays. You need to make sure that profitability is there and that unique approach. And I've seen my students, like I always tell people, like my goal is to 10 times your path than mine. Like you can do it 10 times faster than we did because you'll have the resources and knowledge. And it's a real thing that, we're not asking questions like, what comforter should we do? It's like, we're asking the questions like, is this foundation even sound to hold a tiny home? Like that's a huge thing that you need to look at.
Yeah. And I think if you look at what you do, especially on the land builds, it's much more complicated than just buying a short-term rental that has regular plumbing and everything's all set. But if you're buying land to build, everything can go wrong. And I think some people think like, oh, what's the big deal? It's just a piece of land. Like, have you investigated how people are going to go to the bathroom? Like you said, septic's not cheap. I just put one in at a flips, 42 grand. I mean, it can be a lot. And if you're not near anything, there's other complications with electricity or how you're going to do it.
Yeah, I always say land is not created equal. And that's why when you go on Zillow and you see $5,000 pieces of land and $500,000, I'm like, there's a reason for that. Usually, like you said, I always tell people, especially in the unique approach, like, you basically need to think of your 3 main utilities and which one is the most important for you, or do you want all of them? I always say like power is probably the number one to strive for if you can, because water can be done a few different ways. And same with, septic or whatnot. But I always tell people, like, if you can't have all 3, you need to pick which one's most important. And the price is probably going to reflect that.
Yeah.
But one of our properties, we had to bring power in, we had to bring septic in, we had to do everything. There was nothing. It was vacant land and dirt. So.
But that's huge to be able to tell someone what that process is like, because it's going to be way more than they think. Oh, it's no big deal. I'll just build a well. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah. The cost. Yeah. I had someone who, he was doing excavation dirt work, and he reached out to me, thank goodness. And I was like, make sure you ask this one question on the guy who's quoting the job. And that one question saved him $80,000. And I was like, dirt can be expensive. Like people don't, it's like the tangible things you don't see. I always laugh, this renovation we did, I'm like, all of our money went into things you'll never see. Like you'll never see the insulation. You'll never see the lumber, but that's what's going to be important.
Yeah. But that's your long-term asset protection. Yeah. Like I always say, like whenever I do a driveway, I'm like, I hated everything about that. I spent $10,000. There's not a single person who's going to pull up and be like, sweet driveway. driveway.
Yeah.
Like it's just a driveway. No one cares, but later you're not going to have everything growing through and cracks that make then
Yep.
the cracks in the driveway make them think, well, what's going on in the house? And that's even more important for these short-term stays because people are only staying for a little bit and they're also choosing to book before they're ever seeing the property. And I think that's the thing that's so important now. It's modern marketing has changed. So we have to use the internet and use smart photography to kind of show what the stay is going to feel like, not just what it looks like. Because like you said, it can look one way, but it can feel a different way for someone who's a city dweller who's like, I thought a yurt, wait, it's really just like this circular thing. And, I don't know that they know what that is.
Exactly. Yeah, no, and I honestly say, like, if you just do it the right way, you'll actually be saving money in the long run because you'll not have to take a property down for 6 months to redo it the right way. Like you just, this renovation, it could have been 6 months or 12 months, but we went the extra mile to replace the entire floor joist, not just half. Those things really do matter in the long run. And we invest with the idea of one, cash flow and profit in the short end, but also long-term appreciation. We've been able to scale and be our own bank because of the equity and appreciation. So that's important to us. And, that's where the generational wealth will come in and you get to feel it in the short end and the long end.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting because I run a big on-market team too as well. And I think that if you're evaluating how people used to look at rental properties, you kind of look at your traditional scale. Well, here's your monthly rent, but specific unique stay short-term rentals have such higher value because you can show them, well, look, I made 120 grand last year. And they're like, what? 120,000, when somebody else, your monthly rent would have been like 12,000. Like this is the way that you also have leverage to sell later if you wanted to, because there are people who want to walk into basically a turnkey short-term rental. You're not doing turnkey, but if you ever decided to sell, someone could walk in and just get the whole system and it's ready to go, and they can figure out the transfer on the hosting as well.
Yeah, I have had actually people to bring up that some of you guys listening might be wondering this with unique stays, how is the appreciation value? Because some people say, if I buy land and put 10 tiny houses on it, who's going to say that's worth something? But I actually have, I always try to encourage people, and I have students doing this approach where they're literally, bringing property and land to life with the thought to sell it as a business. So it's kind of different when you're doing these unique stays. A 30-year traditional loan might not be the case on it because banks are like, no way, it's a tree
they don't
house.
Understand, yeah.
Exactly. But I'm seeing, with the unique stays growing, people are just going to be creating and cultivating these stays and selling it as a short-term rental business and not just a piece of property like we've done the last 100 years.
Yeah. And I also think it's interesting based on what you've said too, that the unique stays kind of used to apply to where the destination was. And now it's also the vehicle, meaning the house, like yurts, definitely different, tree houses, different, geodesic domes. These are all things that I would want to stay in. Even A-frames as a house. And I owned a regular A-frame house for a long time. But I think it just gives you that thing where, like you're saying, you're doing a getaway. So not only am I getting away from my area, I'm going to a new destination, but I'm also going to live in a place that's not like what I live in, for good and bad. Maybe it is a little bit harder to do laundry in the winter if it's in an outhouse laundry type of situation. But I think that's really what we learned during the pandemic that people are looking for. They want it to be a little different. Since you really got a lot of this going during the pandemic and kept going through that, did you see the change in how people were looking for properties during that time? Because then it was like people are just scrambling to get away, but that hasn't stopped. The lure is still there.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because, everyone's like, oh, well, some people, in remote areas probably peaked in their pandemic, which would be like a glamping stay. And like now you're probably feeling the hurt. And we're actually like each year just getting more and more revenue. I think there's multiple reasons. We started at a great time for rural areas and unique stays. So that was in our benefit. But we've also gotten better every year, like the professional photos came in and we've cultivated the stay a little bit. So that's not a coincidence to me. But I personally see the rural national park outdoors feel growing in a lot more markets than we see these metro cities growing. So it's really cool to be able to offer these experiences to guests that never would have put themselves in that boat to maybe, you know, they probably shouldn't even be the owner of these. Like, it's just reality that it's a tougher way of ownership in land sometimes, but it is so cool to have people message you and say like, you know, that was everything I needed. I've never been able to like escape like that. And they're only 20 minutes from town, but they just feel like they're by themselves on 30 acres.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the proximity to something is important just for people to note. So, you know, like, can I get DoorDash here? Because maybe you are remote, but you have to know, like, if they're not getting to that one you were talking about. If there's no mailbox, you're not getting a pizza up top. So like for that one, what do you tell people in terms of like food? Pick up food on the way.
Yes.
Don't leave.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I literally do. Yeah, I tell people in the description for where it's live for everyone, I say, you know, like when it's like about the neighborhood access, I believe I have in there, like, you know, Ubers will not be reliable. Ubers may drop them off, but they won't come up to get them.
Right.
So I always say that because some people take like the train into town and they just get a car, taxi or them around. So I say like, I really encourage you to grab groceries on your way up because to us, it's like, oh, we're just going up the hill 20 minutes, but that's far for some people to be 25 minutes from a nearest store or grocery store. So just to enhance that guest experience, I always send in my message day of like, you know, grab food on your way up so you don't have to, you can just enjoy it. And I don't make it a negative thing. I say, you know, grab food so you can enjoy the views, soak in the hot tub, not grab food because you're going to be 25 minutes from town.
You're never going to get food again if you don't bring it up. You're going to starve. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think that's important. It goes to a lot of what we talked about, which is being not necessarily over informative, but giving all the information that you've learned over the course of your listing to help people have the best experience, which then helps you get the best reviews and hopefully either get repeat clients or get them to say, well, that stay was unique. I want to see which other unique stays Zoey has in the area because maybe I want to try a different one. Like you said, the first two that you had were different, but they trust you as a host so they can go, maybe I will try that treehouse. They had everything laid out here. It's not as far off for them once they know you as a host.
Yeah, it's actually, that's a great point. And a huge, you know, Heather Blankenship, she owns, I think like almost all of her units are within 100 miles of each other. I want to say hour or two, you know, there is something to be said for that. And I really see that model. If, you know, our market's almost getting priced to where our next investment, we will be trying to do a build on our property we still have. But after that, we may be tapped out because of, you know, $2 million plus price points.
Yeah.
But I've had guests message me like, oh, I'd love to stay at the yurt, but it looks like it's not available. I've stayed here before. And now because I have other stays in the area, I can actually say like, you know, it's not available, but I would love to host you in the new log cabin we just developed. You know, it's a little closer to town and whatnot. And I even do polls on my Instagram, like, would you rather stay on top of the mountain with these views or 5 minutes from town in the canyon? And almost everyone has voted the canyon being closer to amenities. And I'm just like, all right, well, I guess this stay is probably going to top what our other properties are performing as just because of that proximity. But that just shows it's two different guests. I'm not hosting the same person at those two properties.
Yeah, but that even goes back to not just the proximity for the cleaners and the crew and the electricians and the plumbers, but it's also just giving alternative options for people. Somehow, if there's ever a booking error and you have an extra one for people who have 4 or 5 in the area, you can always say like, or if somebody just doesn't like it and another one's available, you don't have to give up on it. You're like, well, we do have this log cabin closer to town. They're like, I'll try that, you know, before they do something crazy on their reviews because it was their, you know, their fault. You've explained it all. But, you know, there is that line of people pleaser, but you really don't want to get a bad review because the algorithm really doesn't like the one star reviews.
Exactly. Yeah. Even when like, you know, people cancel or have to change their dates and you're blocked for the other dates, there's just so much leverage being able to say like, we have, you know, this property, we're hosting actually a nearby neighbor's getting married. So he's staying at the property. And I was able to say, I have additional units. If you need another 10 people, I can host you guys and do an off platform and just bundle it all together. So there's a lot of, you know, on the back end, it gets really a lot clearer as a host and owner with your cleaners and team to just keep it in a general area if you can.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, tell everybody where the best place to get in touch with you is. I think it's Instagram. That is Zoey Berghoff on Instagram, right?
Yep. I respond to all DMs. If you guys, I try to share a lot of our journey, wins, losses, challenges we go through. So if that interests you, make sure to reach out.
And then tell us about the coaching program. I know if they DM you on Instagram, they'll get the info, but just tell us a little bit more on that and where they can find that.
Yeah, so it's a 10-week mentorship that we work together. It is centered around unique stays, if that is where you see your business going. And the goal is ownership, appreciation, cash flow, not so much co-hosting arbitrage. And if you are interested, you can just DM me Rooted and I can jump on a call with you and walk you through it. But it's definitely for that investor who may have a few properties but hasn't gone that unique approach, or is getting in and knows that's where they want to start just from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and before we hop off, though, how important has nature been for your stays? Because I know that's kind of important overriding feature. Like you guys obviously like nature, but you're incorporating nature as really one of the big amenities for your properties, where other people, I know, Rob's like, I'm going to build 3 pickleball courts. It's like, well, you can't do that on top of a mountain. So how big a part is nature playing in the experiences that you're trying to give people?
Yeah, that is a great question. It's almost a amenity that you can't put a price point on, which is super interesting. You can't get a true ROI on it. But one of our projects we just did, it was a log cabin, and we almost took out like as much as we could and put windows in, which basically engulfs you in this canyon feel. Every spot you're in the house, you're seeing almost floor to ceiling windows.
Yeah.
And that's an amenity that like we may never know the true ROI on a $15,000 window package, which I also have a story about that on my Instagram if you're interested in windows. Another thing that, you don't know what you don't know. But that is an ROI that will be long-term appreciation, if we ever choose to sell the property. But that short-term profit is also in there. So we really do think about that in terms of the remoteness, the serenity, just the proximity to everything, and then having that nature engulfed around you. And that's why I tell people, like, if you don't want to be a part of nature, don't stay with us. We're not right downtown. We're not a walking distance from everything. But if you want to see elk in your driveway, we might be a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the thing that I've noticed about you from following you is that it's very clearly authentic. And a lot of people who I've had on, I'm focused, like when I find people who either I find them through friends, I'm looking at the social media to see, is this real, or is this another thing that all of us who are in the business don't like? And when I kept watching, I was like, no, look, I remember, you guys were pregnant, and then all of a sudden then you had the baby, and then the baby's inside, in the properties. And that was like, that's really like approachable, I think, to people, especially new parents who are like, well, can we, be short-term rental investors? Like we already have a kid, or we want to have kids. And you're showing them you can do it. It's not always pretty, like you said before, but you figure it out, right? And I think that's really the thing that a lot of us are looking for on social media, between the noise that's in there. So I've really appreciated about that on your journey, and I think it helps people get there. And I'm glad I got you on the show. We got it done today. I know you had to cancel last time because babies do things, right?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for all the kind words. Yeah, our daughter's first place from the birth center she was born was the cabin that we were working on. So we are remote hosts, but we do have our hands in our projects. And like I said, like we really truly invest with the thought of like, would we want to stay here? Would we want to own this? And we know that there's guests out there that are similar to us. So we actually, everyone that's worked on this cabin project, electricians, plumbers, we've guaranteed everyone gets a weekend at the cabin to enjoy it, because it's just been such a long project and so much work. So thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and the journey is just going to continue, baby and everything.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. And that was, I hope no one missed that last tip. If you give a weekend to the people who work so hard on it, that's like magic. I mean, that is just fantastic.
Yeah, our engineer has followed up on that, actually. He's like, so are you guys still going to do that? I'm like, yep, you'll get it. It's not ready yet, but you're going to get it. So I was like, maybe not like peak season, you guys, but let's do a little like spring and fall.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, those connections you build are the most valuable thing you can have in this industry, honestly, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Zoey, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. That was Zoey Berghoff. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Wait, you have reached the end of the show. This is the part where you're going to get ready to check out, but I've actually changed this part. For over 120 episodes, you heard the same thing. Well, now I've changed it. I've thought about doing intros to the next episode, but I'm going to hold off on that for now. These are my pitches at the end. I've got nothing to sell you at all, but I do want to remind you that it really would help us if you support the podcast in the right way. All that means is subscribing to the podcast so you get it on Monday and Thursday, writing us a 5-star review if you believe that we deserve a 5-star review, sharing it with your friends, and being a participant in the Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing community. Soon there's going to be a new website launched. Maybe when you're listening to this, it's already going to be out there. That's where we're going to have collaboration. You're going to be able to see a lot from the guest. It is coming soon, and I just want to tell you, from me to you, I don't know how I got here, over 100 episodes. I'm so appreciative of you listening to the podcast and especially sticking around to hear this part. We'll see you next episode.